Hi guys, welcome to the Improvement Season podcast. It is me, Steve Hall, and over there on the other side, this is good versus evil. You've got a little bit of good in you actually. Majority evil with a little bit of good is Pascal Floor and some ice cream.
And some ice cream, yeah. I have to admit, I haven't seen the latest Star Wars movie yet.
I have a feeling, are you of the opinion, how do you feel about Disney taking it?
Torn. That's okay. The word. I think that they could have made it very cool, and they decided not to.
They did typical Disney. They Disneyfied it. That's what they did.
So I haven't watched the last movie, but I know what was going on. So that's all that needs to be said, though.
How are things otherwise? Are you completed your final overreaching? Are you deloading now?
Today. It was the last session. And I don't know if you've ever had that. When I finished the last set I did reverse flies then, I was actually then going to the cleaning station and actually like laughing out loudly. Like, like it was just such a relief to finish this week. It was one of the freaking hardest training weeks I've ever experienced. And also just like one of the hardest mesocycles I've ever done. Like hands down. And I think that my eyesight is proof to that at the moment.
Yeah. Is that improved or is it still?
No, it's still like flashing, but I think I didn't expect it to improve while I'm still training.
No.
And I very much assume that it has something to do with visual migraine, because this is connected to the central or the nervous system. And I mean, what am I doing right now? I'm probably overreaching. Like I'm intentionally causing a huge amount of stress for the system. Like the amount of work that I did here this week is kind of insane. And I don't even want to say it out loudly, but the thing is
about to say, how much were you doing?
It's crazy. Something like 27 sets for chess, for example, and I could look it up actually. But it was all productive. It wasn't like that it went into the territory of like junk volume. I can wholeheartedly say that, because what I very much made sure with this mesocycle is very much listen to my body and the feedback, and also the performance on a per session basis. And I didn't force things that weren't there. I can wholeheartedly say that. But this was the absolute limit this week. The absolute limit. Especially like from a mental perspective. And also from a systemic perspective. I think that local muscle fatigue, I could even still do more when it comes to the muscular endurance. But then it once again comes back to the question that we actually talked about like last week. Are the muscular adaptations of doing or being able to do more volume just that? Like adaptations of being able to do more volume. Right? But yes, systemically fried. Once again, as you can tell, probably by the eyesight and the visual thing. And from a focus perspective, I got to a point where it was just like mental penetration, basically, especially the lower body days, the SLDLs and the RDLs. The RDLs, when I approached that training session, it was just like, I haven't even done the first set, and I was just already like questioning how I will survive this and how I will be able to keep up with the performance I did last week. I was at that point where I was just like questioning whether this is even possible.
Yeah, I know. I said it to you on a voice note where like your off-season mesocycles, your improvement season mesocycle, should be like every time you come to the end of one, it's like that feels like the new hardest, because that's essentially like progressive overload in a sense. But I will say there's a bit of a caveat there, because I was going to ask you this. What are your next steps? Because I'm just thinking where I am in relation to how many mesocycles of massing I've done. I'm coming into my third. Are you already in a fourth mesocycle of massing? Where are you at the moment?
No,
where's your
block? So I went back into massing when the gyms reopened. I think this was only the second mesocycle, I believe.
I forget that you were pretty much a maintenance training whilst at home.
Exactly, because I wasn't sure, like, okay, should I go into the gaining phase now, training from at home with minimum equipment? And I rather wanted to actually take just the maintenance phase and then go into a gaining phase once I can properly overload with all of the equipment that there is. Yeah, so I think that I will definitely do another mesocycle of gaining, and then perhaps, depending on the performance and how everything is feeding, do another one, or then even start to consider doing something like a mini cut. And depending on how things are going, right? I can't really tell, but if I have another gaining phase in me, then we are already coming to a point where it's close to the end of the year, and then I could even consider actually going into a contest prep for next year. Would be a consideration then. But this is something that I don't want to decide yet.
Yeah, it's funny. Someone messaged me. They're listening to, I don't know if it was an improvement season we did together or another podcast. And apparently I said something like, yeah, I'll probably compete in 2020. It just depends what comes up. I'm not going to guarantee you I'm stepping on stage. And they're like, Steve, you predicted the coronavirus. Yeah. And I was just like, brilliant.
Jinxed it.
I think that's a mature kind of, I think there's a careful middle ground where it's like, you don't want to continually be like, oh, I might compete, I might not. But at the same time, you don't want to be like, oh my God, do or die, I have to compete this year, because the stage is always there. And if you're having a tremendous I keep calling it off-season, improvement season, then why stop it in its tracks? Just like you don't want mini cut early, because that momentum is great. Keep it going for as long as possible.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm in such a great spot right now. I don't know how it happened, but it freaking happened that I matured so much over the past year or two when it comes to my lifting, and also the relationship I have with food and cutting and gaining and stuff. It has matured so much, and I think because of that I should take advantage of this situation. And for once, now that I'm in a good position and I am even still very much on point with my nutrition in a gaining phase, take advantage of the situation, right? And milk it out. And if then by the end of the year, I'm in a position where I'm just like, yeah, this was very, very productive, and now I'm ready to enter a contest prep, then why not go there, right? But this is always then dependent of the position that you put yourself in prior to that already. It should never be like, okay, shit, the gaining phase was so shitty, I actually gained a lot of fat, and now I want to do an extended cutting phase, and that's why I enter a contest prep. No, it should come just like, I don't even want to say it, naturally. At least in this instance, I can think of many scenarios where you should really plan for it. But right now, it's just like, it is an option, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think the cool thing is for both of us is we did an extended cutting phase, which brought us so much massing time that before, like, we won't get, with one mini cut, we can get from a little bit sloppy to very tight, and could then have a bit more gainy and go into a contest prep there soon after. Now, if we continued and we didn't go into contest prep, we'd probably eventually get sloppy, and you need to then have an extended cutting phase and then potentially bring things back and start prep. But I definitely think, we're in a very similar position in terms of like level of like body fat over stage, and then like where we are. And so in that mini cut distance from like bringing fat levels down to an appropriate level to start prep, where you haven't got like much more than 20 pounds to lose, hopefully. Yeah.
How was the first week back in the gym, or the first training sessions rather?
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, because the first session, I mean, I didn't know what to expect, because like the gym, every gym seems to have its own kind of way it's doing things, but the gym is meant to have an app. Well, it does have an app, but it doesn't work. Where it's meant to tell you how many people are in the gym, like the capacity. Perfect. And if you have to queue and things like this, it's not working. But thankfully, I can go in the day where it's like at 50% or even less capacity than that. So yeah, the leg training session was so productive. Being back in the hack squat, having leg extensions, proper leg extensions there. For me, squats were becoming stale, so I've kept them in, but they're on the back burner. So hack squats have come on the front. So that first session, I actually got like some quad soreness again, because I hadn't been experiencing that for the last couple of mesocycles, which made me suspicious of some of the exercise selection that I was doing. Like, I was working very hard, I was getting good pumps in the quads, but for whatever reason, I wasn't getting the same sort of soreness sensation that I used to get. So the hack squat brought that back in. But because at the moment, I'm not sure how exactly what they're expecting of us in terms of as members. I've been trying to clean everything I touch, which means trying to clean every plate that I put on like the hack squat, and then like wiping those all down, putting them away. And I was like, I probably should be doing that. I don't think anyone else is necessarily doing that. And it's making my sessions take twice the length. So I was like, I'm going to do some sessions from home where I have all the kit that I want to be doing, and I wouldn't change anything if I was going to the gym. And then we have an apartment gym across the way, which has a Smith machine. So I wanted to use a Smith machine anyway, and it's less busy than the gym. So it's really easy to get in there. And that helps bring my steps down, because the trouble with going to the gym again is I go back and forth, and actually the commuting time I was worried it was going to like hurt my productivity with work and things. It doesn't. They just act as nice breaks through the day, which is really great. But I think I'm slowly getting a bit more comfortable going to the gym and just like cleaning down like what I'm like the actual machine rather than every single plate I touch, leaving kind of the gym floor managers to kind of do that sort of thing.
Funny enough, this is actually something that I thought of myself while being in the gym here just, I think, 2 weeks ago. Like, okay, I'm wiping things off which I touched during the set. But what about the plates? Because, I mean, so many people grab them as well. And I don't know, but I'm not really following the research on COVID anymore. I never really have, right? It was always just like from the virologist that then gave public statements, which I then got my news from. And now the last thing that I heard, or am aware of, that most of the spreading just comes via aerosols and not really via touching surfaces and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember talking to you and how Mike, in a Q&A I'd done with him, which hasn't gone live yet, convinced me to wear a mask. But I took my mask to the gym. No one had a mask on. And I mean, I didn't particularly want, I'd said to Mike, I didn't really want to wear one because I get really hot, difficult to breathe a little bit during the gym. But if that was the thing everyone was doing, I'd be wearing one. I had seen someone say you need like 80% compliance for face masks to do anything. And considering no one was wearing one in the gym, I was like, I'm just not going to do that. And I'm going to stay away from people. I'll clean down as much as I can. But it's been nice. People seem like it feels kind of normal, which is nice.
And kind of scary because people are getting negligent once again, at least here in Germany. And also I've seen cases in Belgium rise again because people are just like going back to the normal thing and becoming a little bit irresponsible once again. There was a huge party here in Berlin the other day in the park, like with, I don't even know how many people, 2,000 people or so. They met up in the park raving. Like, this is just like absolutely ridiculous and absolutely also irresponsible. Yeah. This is even something that the government says, like, if people are meeting up for these kind of secret parties, this is stupid. This is plain stupid.
This is something I'm concerned for clients. Like I have a client in Israel and they're changing things like every time he checks in. I'm like, so is the gym open? He's like, no, the gym shut this week. I had to train like in my studio, and it's like they might close my studio. I have to train from home. I'm really hoping in the UK things like they've opened, they stay open, but if there's a second wave, we could all be back at home again.
Please leave the gyms open.
Matt August keeps commenting on when I like write about my programming and mention about like essentially around coronavirus. He keeps putting hashtag Corona programming. I think he's kind of trying to manage it himself, but I think he's in California, so they've got it bad at the moment.
Yeah. Same goes for New York. Shut or locked down ever since like March. I have like 2 clients located there. Nothing is happening there. Nothing is happening.
I have a client in New York. He's driving out of state to a gym now.
Yep. One of them is doing that as well.
It's just
to
crazy.
get access to the gym.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know how many sessions I've got in the gym, but all my leg days are in the gym because it's given me a new appreciation for machines, for leg work. Like, just like being in an actual real leg curl machine, it's just beautiful. And like being able to use that hack squat and things. So it's it's been a real pleasure being back in there. I never used the gym for like the environment and the social, like it's just never been that. But for the equipment, it's been pretty good.
I know how much of an asshole you are when you are in the gym. You are laughing, but people around you are crying. So,
so yeah, no, I'm pretty excited, and I was talking to you about whether or not I was going to mini cut after this. I'm still undecided. I'll see how things go. I essentially it'll be a combination of, if my appetite is still good and training feels like it's going well, I'll ride that momentum and I'm not too sloppy. But at the moment, unless my body comp just, as I hit like 190 pounds, I just suddenly look like shit. I think I can ride up.
What happened to your delts, by the way? The delts and the arms, they're getting freakier day by day. When you're doing, like, for example, the front lat spread, or just like any kind of front posing where the delts are popping, it's just like, ugh, man, what is this? Stop
They've improved.
It. They have improved. Was it a lot of dumbbell lateral raises each and every single day?
You know what? I've been running basically as a standard. On my push days, I do lateral raises. On my pull days, I do upright rows 4 times per week, like side delt focus. That seems to be doing quite the trick at the moment, at least. And higher rep cable work just blows up my delts. Every time I do it, I'm just like, wow. And it was funny, actually. I don't know why I bring this up, but it's just funny because it's definitely related to everything. But someone commented on, because I put up my PM session and I had my kind of cable lateral raise. They're like, oh, you could do this to modify how you're putting the delt in a more stretched position, more shortened position, like basic, like biomechanics type talk. Like, and I get it. And I've tried, I don't know if you've ever tried like the Egyptian lateral raises where you do it like between your legs or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I've tried these different variants. I've tried doing it cuffed.
Yeah.
Always feels best in front of me with a D handle.
And that's the thing, right? With this kind of one pet peeve with biomechanic discussions, because I mean, when we take a look at a skeleton model, this may be then correct, and then also when you put some muscle above it with ligaments, yada yada yada. But this is just a generalization, and we all know how freaking different people are built. And the best example is just something like the Dean Somerset article around hip joints.
Yeah,
it's so great and in depth, and that is just like the proof. And it's just like this article. This is just like the entire message for every kind of joint, every kind of shape in your body. It's just different, and this even applies to someone like if you say to someone, okay, you take the handle for a pulling movement that feels most natural to you. And I would even say like 80 to 90% of the time, it's a different handle for you than it is for me. Right? Where you then also feel it in your back and all that kind of stuff, right? The human body, each and every one is built so differently. And we are speaking about marginal things, but even so, some significant differences, right?
Yeah.
And the marginal things we can't even detect. And that is so funny because, on paper, this may seem like the perfect execution, but 90% of the time it isn't for that individual, right? So, it's good to know these kind of things, and it's good to build some awareness of how the body moves and all that kind of stuff. But also here, after all, I think that experience trumps it all. Where it's like, okay, if you have worked with, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of clients, and you've seen it over and over again that a specific body structure or type reacts a certain way, or you know that this is the best way in doing things for this individual, I think experience trumps it all. And this is even something that Cliff Wilson said with peaking. He can't really tell why, but he can look at a picture and based on this skin, he can say like, okay, this dude is going to react well to carbs and this one isn't. And he can't really explain why, but this is just something like where Daniel Kahneman in Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow is actually talking about the fast thinking brain and the slower thinking brain, where at some point experience becomes intuition. And I think that this also plays into this as well.
Fast, efficient fat loss. Does that sound like music to your ears? The mini cut movement might just be for you. Mini cuts are like robbing the fat bank. You want to get in and out with as much fat as possible. In a short period of time, you could easily look to lose 6 to 12 pounds of fat. The mini cut movement is excellent. There's group support for extra accountability and also expert help within the group. We have educational videos to keep you on track along the way, and you get all your nutrition and training customized and individualized for you. So if that sounds of interest, get involved with the mini cut movement. Yeah, it's one of those, I think for bodybuilders, just the principle of individualization is just larger. And like a really easy example is looking at chest, like when you see a striated chest, different, like the fibers go in different directions. Like you see different like crab poses or like striated chests. It's just the way they splay. So I think like some people find dumbbell bench pressing so much better because they can like move it into a position where it's like that's getting the stretch on the pec. Whereas for me, the barbell is just like demolishes my chest every single time. A lot of people say, oh, barbell bench pressing is no good for the chest. But some people, it just works. And this is why, and something we do a lot, and I see it a lot, but we've stopped doing sharing form videos to our Facebook group. But something I saw a lot of the coaches doing is basically you look at a form video, if it looked good, I often just say, how did it feel?
Yeah.
And it's like, if they say it felt good or bad, it's like, if it felt good, awesome. Like that, it sounds really basic and simple, but you can't be as exact to assess everything. If it feels like they're getting a great pump, great sensation, then like that's good. And that's something I struggle with because I have seen some people, and I don't know if I'm misinterpreting what they mean by this, but like saying the feel doesn't mean much and like almost questioning my muscle connection. And then that just like, I'm just like, what, my body's lying to me? I know that sometimes confuses me.
Yeah. I don't know what to say to this because this is what I've seen as well. And I beg to differ when it comes to that, but this is also me being absolutely biased. And that's why I have a hard time actually then being or staying objective, because I have made such a difference, such a different experience with that. Because for me, feeling the exercise where it was supposed to be felt has made a tremendous difference for me. And I think that this is also the case for other people. And I've seen it with a dozen of athletes. So saying because a study says like my muscle connection isn't important or it doesn't really play a role, I've seen it times and times again that it is very much important.
Yeah. And when we boil it down to maybe there's not a lot of research on it, maybe there's not a lot of research on advanced trainees, but you ask someone like John Meadows or some of the IFBB pros, and maybe they're doing something a bit quirky, and you ask them like, why are you lifting like that? And like, feel it. Like it feels the best. And it's like, yeah, I mean, oftentimes you can't look at success. Like success does leave clues. And I think this is probably one of those clues to why they're successful. Sometimes you can't use this argument all the time. Anecdote is weak evidence, but I'm saying, I think there's some telltale there.
Yeah. And it must be said though, that you can make things be felt in specific body parts with being very suboptimal and less hypertrophic. So, for example, I don't know, whatever exercise, right? Partial range of motions, getting into that burn feeling, high repetitions that aren't really very productive. And then all of a sudden, yeah, you feel it amazingly, but was it very much stimulative? No, it wasn't, right? So it must be said, of course, that there are exceptions to the rule here. But overall, if we are talking about proper mind-muscle connection with proper technique in somewhat in the 6 to 20 repetition range with a close proximity to failure, I think that this is much, much better than not feeling it at all and the other boxes still ticked.
Yeah. I have nothing more to add to that conversation. Any other highlights? You're deloading.
This is definitely a highlight.
You'll be going on a trip soon during your deload as well, celebrating
birthday trip. So next week is my and Tony's birthday. He's already turning 1. Time passes by
time flies.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. And you haven't even seen him yet. That's crazy. It's super
IRL.
sad. You will never see him as a baby. Because when he turns 1, he's not officially not a baby anymore. So Steve, you have to come before the 7th of August to Berlin if you want to see the little baby boy. We are going on a short trip. I have no idea where we are going, so Katie is planning that. It's going to be a surprise. So we will see, but I'm very much looking forward to that deload, and hopefully it's something relaxing where I'm able to lean back and don't do that much. So
I love deload weeks because sometimes I feel like I get a bit behind with other life duties, and sometimes like bits of work I want to get done.
I've already things planned as well.
Yeah, but I also want to do what you're doing and plan more like trips during the deload week because we're relatively inflexible the rest of the time. So
it wasn't my plan after all. So if it was to me, I would probably stayed at home and be like, okay, 5th of August. Birthday, who fucking cares, right? But for Katie, she likes these kind of things. For her, it's important that we as a family do these kind of events, and I can see why. For me, it's always hard because I've never grown up that way, so I always have to force myself to actually go on these kind of trips and stuff, which I want. It's kind of an ambivalent thing where it's like I want to spend time with family. That's above everything else, right? But at the same time, it's just like trips don't really mean much to me, the same as holidays don't really mean much to me because I never had it as a kid. I don't have any kind of a good positive connotation to holidays. It's not important to me at all because I never grew up with those, right? And I know for Katie, it's quite a different experience. She had great experiences going on trips with her family. For her, it's just like a family thing that is happy time. And for me, it's just like, I don't give a fuck about holidays, to be honest.
I hope it will change as you'll have Tony and Hugo with you, and obviously Katie, because it will be like, your chance to just be absolutely selfish with family, give them your focus, and also give your kids the experiences that maybe you didn't have, that maybe you wish you could have had. I don't know. I was lucky enough to have holidays, and like I think back to some of them, I'm just like, man, how was like life so good back then? Like just no responsibilities with my sisters. Should we get some questions?
Yeah, let's do this. So Harry Smith asks, any updates on the 2020 seminar?
So this is a good question because I literally spoke to Alberto and Jared last night, and we're in the works to get Eric and Mike on to talk about volume and progressions through a mesocycle at some point. So that will be happening. And I said it to them both there. I was like, these are the discussions that would be even better in real life, partly because Jared's internet kept breaking down, but also because it would just be more productive in person.
Jared.
So it will be, hopefully it will be going ahead next year. I said I'd be in contact soon to them both, and they're both very up for it. I know Mike and Eric are both really up for it too. So fingers crossed it goes ahead next year. But in the meantime, if people are after that sort of content, I always forget how great the previous seminar with Mike and Jared was, like the hypertrophy specific seminar that we had with them both. That like the kind of the lectures and information there outlined is fantastic. You can literally draw up your entire improvement season, contest prep, like everything. They cover it all there. So I definitely think if people are interested in picking, like if you're like craving that seminar, some information, we have all the pre-recorded past years available, so you can pick those up as well. But also look forward to next year because I know a lot of people have already got their tickets, so hopefully we can deliver on that.
Yeah, absolutely, nothing to add there. So Andrew White, of course, the supporter, thank you very much by the way for that, Andrew. At this point in your lifting careers, how would you go about an ideal digging phase at the tail end of a fat loss phase? Also, are there any apparent downsides of taking calories as low as, in quotation marks, survivable, provided protein needs and fat minimum are met? I would also be curious. Let's cover the first two first and then get to the third one, right? So cool. At this point in your lifting careers, how would you go about an ideal digging phase at the tail end of a fat loss phase?
So I think an ideal digging phase, I think when I hear digging phase, I don't know if other people get the same connotation with that. They kind of think you're working even harder at this point, but I would say you're actually pulling back. You're still moving forward, but as you're getting closer and closer to that gold per se, that gold physique that you're looking for, you need to be more and more careful with each kind of dig that you take, so you're not damaging anything below. You're also quite deep in your hole, so like debris. I remember this is like Jacob Skepis, his analogy, where you're like down in the hole, you've been digging already, you've dug quite far, there's debris above you, so you have to be careful with every little step that you take down there, and you're close to the goal anyway. So for me, it's like losing it between 0.25 to 0.5%. You're really close, you're very lean, and if anything, you can even start reversing and bringing like that deficit, making that deficit smaller, so you can kind of almost be filling up with glycogen, improving training performance, and still losing little bits of fat along the way. That's not always the case, but that would be the ideal position. And I guess probably digging occurs before that reverse, but they can kind of happen part in part, depending if you're early ready enough. So yeah, I'd kind of like someone to dig into like a qualify, and then reverse into finals. That would be like, oof, perfect. And for me, digging is that 0.5 to 0.25% of body fat loss, and that's sub 10% for a male, like sub 18% for a female, thereabouts.
No, absolutely. Also here, nothing to add, really.
And then go ahead. The calories.
Yeah. Should I reread it?
No, it's all right. I think it's a tricky one to answer because there's quite a few other things that go in line with that. It's kind of like, well, what rate of loss is it? What body fat percentage are you? How's your training performance going? What is the rest of your lifestyle like? It sounds like a very aggressive diet to me, but it could be the tail end of a contest prep for like a female, particularly because they are just consuming fewer calories generally, and therefore you might have to get down there. So I think oftentimes people get very scared about very low calorie intakes, and I think that's warranted. But sometimes for females who have a very adaptive metabolism, or smaller males who have a very adaptive metabolism, who are fairly sedentary, like they don't have much time to commit to doing cardio and steps, they just have to really take calories down. And in those cases, it's about like damage limitation at that stage, with calories being that low. And I wouldn't want to be that low for too long. So yeah, I think that somewhat answers it. You can probably fill in quite a few gaps, Pascal.
Yeah, I'm coming from a different perspective. Why would you ever consider going down that far if you don't have to, right? Sometimes it's just a necessary evil, especially for smaller individuals, smaller females in particularly. They have to sometimes actually just meet their protein targets, meet their minimum fat targets, and then carbs close to zero, right? And
some veg.
Yeah, exactly. The only carbohydrates are coming then from maybe protein sources or the fat sources then, and also then from some vegetables. That's all the carbohydrates that they are taking in, right? But why would you ever then go that far if you don't have to, right? What's the benefit? What are you getting out of that? Because the downsides, especially for a bigger individual or bigger, especially male, they are hard, like hard as fuck, unless you are very, very obese or so. We've seen that. There's this case of that guy who I can't even recall how many days he fasted, but like over a year, I think it was, right? And he lost a bunch of weight. It's crazy.
He didn't eat anything.
He didn't eat at all.
Jesus.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. Over a year it was, that's for sure. But for someone like us or so, why would you ever do that, right? What's the benefit for that? This is a valid question that you have to ask yourself. Like, what are you getting out of that, which you couldn't get out of a less aggressive approach, which then has potentially better outcomes as well for something like performance and stuff that needs to be taken into consideration, because for how long do you want to be there? If it's only for like 3 days, yeah, I mean, what's the harm then, right? But if it's longer than a week, you can already bet your ass off that your performance is going to suffer big time. And if your performance is going to suffer, the risk of muscle loss will be highly increased, even if you are meeting your protein targets, simply because the biggest stimulus for muscle retention is just resistance training. And Yeah, this is just where I'm coming from, of like the rationale behind that. Is that just a theoretical question? Because then if it's just theoretically speaking, then it's very, very low for a very long time. And this is something that we've seen even in the Minnesota starvation study. Yes, they didn't have the minimum protein requirements for someone like a lifting population. I don't even know if they got the minimum fat requirements to still stay healthy or so, but you can survive for at a reasonable amount of time. But once again, is that worth any kind of trade-off for us in doing? Is that worth considering? So I'm just having a hard time understanding where this question is coming from, to be honest. I don't know if I'm missing something, Steve.
Whenever I think of the Minnesota starvation study, I think of like the guys, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think someone might have chopped off a finger because he wanted to eat it. And a lot of them actually became chefs afterwards, which is just like
some
crazy.
People had like pictures underneath their bed just to take it out in the middle of the night and look at the picture
of food. Jesus.
Yeah.
I laugh because it's uncomfortable because that's eating disorder. That's like,
So are there any apparent downsides? Yes, there are. Mm-hmm. There are many. I would say that quickly the performance, so the physiological aspects will become very apparent. I think that if you take those drastic measures, the body will respond very quickly in a very, very harsh manner as well. It will just ramp up also the hunger signals and all that kind of stuff. And secondarily, the psychological things will just be unreal. Like if you are putting it down to survivable macros, you will get very irritable. You will quickly lose all of the focus, all of the cognitive abilities on a daily basis for like a certain task in your daily life. And the only thing that you will then be able to do is think about food and go out there and get some food and stuff, right?
This somewhat reminds me of in my contest prep depletion week that I did with Broderick and how I just completely crumbled and broke down in that week. It was hell. And it was like, I legit can remember I do my client check-ins in the morning. I can remember those were a struggle and I'd get dizzy just like doing those. Then I'd train, come back and sleep. And then I don't even know what I did the rest of the day. It was just terrible. But yeah, the only argument I could possibly see that some people might make here is like rapid fat loss. And then if they do lose muscle, it comes back quite quickly because of muscle memory and blah, blah, blah. But my approach is always, why don't we lose at the maximum rate of fat loss whilst maintaining muscle and then get straight into building new muscle rather than regaining anything?
I mean, isn't it like the protein modified sparing
sounds like
fast? Isn't it just like the required protein intake, the required fat intake, and then it's just like what it is, around 1,000 calories or so?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think even Lyle said it, that this is something that is very much unsustainable, and I think that the protein-modified sparing fast is only like 21 days or so. Can it be? No,
maybe
shorter even. I think even shorter, right? No, don't know. Can't really recall, but it's very, very short because everything beyond that, I think it's becoming too much of a strain. I even have talked to people who took DNP, and DNP in very higher dosages, right? And basically it is exactly this, where you are just like burning so many calories at once, and if you're then dieting on top of it all, you just like it is as if you are just doing these kind of things, and you just get ravenous, and the only thing that you have in mind is just like, okay, I don't want to die and I want to eat something.
And then they have to be prepared because the rebound out of a mini cut even is calculated and wanted in many ways to propel a gaining phase. But often I think these approaches, the rapid fat loss, the rebound is going to be even harder. And then the chances for like not feeling good about your physique and kind of seeing the scale weight come rapidly back up. I just see this as a risky move for a lot of individuals, unfortunately.
Yeah. So there are many downsides, I would say, to just like answer the question very briefly. Many downsides. Too many to actually, I think, warrant to do this. most of the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, the last question here, I would also be curious if there's any particular way you would recommend reintroducing the higher carbs for a peak or a test peak. Thanks as always, mates.
Recommended way. I guess I don't know how to answer that question. It's a recommended way. Like if we just approach that from like how do you do a like test peak week? I guess there's two ways I tend to do them. One is introducing some refeed days and then using that data, or doing it during a diet break, during a deload week, which I think the diet break deload week strategy is potentially superior because during a peak week, I tend to be lowering training volume and lowering stress like I am. And that's a more samey type of experience. It's more, it's more like the peak week would be. Whereas a refeed during just a kind of accumulation week, it's a bit different because I'm still getting them to train. So they're still holding to some inflammation. They probably won't replenish glycogen as well. So it's not as good data. And I always say this because a lot of people talk about how important it is to test peaking strategies. And I'm always a very realist. And I'm like, yeah, but every test is not perfect because like you're a leaner individual down the line. Just the week itself, when you're a week out from stage, the emotions you feel, the stresses you feel, it's a different experience, and that will impact your physique in some way. Maybe sleep will be worse. I don't know. Some people change their like work schedule, so they have a week off, and then loads of variables can change. So you can kind of keep as many things the same as possible. So that's something I would do in terms of your peaking strategy. And again, if you're refeeding and you're not in a position where you want to be following a meal plan, you want to be a bit more flexible because you don't need to be that restrictive. That's another variable. During peak week, you want to almost keep everything as much the same as possible. In peak week, you also be reducing some of the kind of higher volume fibrous foods. So yeah, I'm just laying the framework of how hard it is to perfectly test a peak week, especially when someone's dieting. You want them to adhere to the diet, and going through a kind of peak week can be quite restrictive in some ways because you need to control so many variables to ensure that things are going right. So I think my answer actually boils down to making sure that you have good feedback from your client. So for me, I'm very careful to make sure I'm getting pictures at the same sort of time of day, under the same lighting, in the same position, or a video of their physique posing. And that's super valuable. In addition to that, they need to be high quality so I can actually see what's going on. You've probably had it, Pascal, and it's upsetting and frustrating at the same time because like once they haven't got you the good quality photos, it's too late because the day's gone on. So now you have to like react. And so if anything's fuzzy, if the lighting's not very good, it's really hard to give an objective, honest and helpful opinion. And I can remember specifically asking for your opinion at one stage during for one of my shows, asking how like what you thought. And I remember you coming back and being like, Steve, it's too dark, I can't really say anything. And I was like, what the fuck? And I was like, I need help here. And that now, reflecting on it, I can see why you said that, because you could have said something damaging to what was going on because you can't see everything and you can't give a more objective, helpful opinion. So I think it's important to also get your clients some awareness of their own physique, of how things are looking. Like, is the skin tight? Are you looking like their clear muscle definition? Do you feel full? Are you getting kind of a pump when you just like, I don't know, brush your teeth or something? That's a good sign that you've got like really good glycogen fullness. I can remember Broderick saying that to me. He was like, are you getting a pump when you like brush your teeth or do the washing? I was like, yeah, I am. He was like, awesome. You're full. Yeah. So these are some of the like the biofeedback you can use. So yeah, I'd make sure to get really good photos. I like them the morning kind of before refeeding, the night of refeeding, and then kind of morning and night for a few days after to then assess the physique under the same conditions to kind of get some awareness. And I'll say for male bodybuilders who are legitimately shredded, it can make quite a difference. For someone who isn't legitimately shredded, or for like bikini competitors, it doesn't tend to make a night and day difference. If anything, maybe you're just removing some stress from water retention. But I've had females, I've even had one compete recently where she looked great before she peaked and looked maybe slightly better afterwards, but a lot of that was down to tan, stress reduction, and not a lot down to like glycogen replenishment, because bikini competitors aren't massively muscled. They shouldn't be. And they also aren't shredded. You're not seeing kind of striations or anything like that. So it's much less important.
Tell you what, Andrew, when it comes to something like bikini athletes as well, and they want, or that you are peaking them, sometimes you only do it for the psychological effect. because they have the understanding perhaps that there is something like the peak week. They're expecting like a night and day of difference, right? And you know that it's probably not going to happen for most bikini athletes. And thus, sometimes you just do a peak week just for the sake of them feeling like, okay, yeah, shit, a lot has happened here. I'm looking so much fuller now. I'm looking, this pops. Hey, great, perfect. If you step on stage being more confident in the way you look and thus you perform better, perfect. Everything is accomplished.
Yeah. Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
Yeah, for a lot of people, I think the pure stress reduction, the focus on sleep, the inflammation dropping off, like that, and then building them up as a coach, like saying like, oh yeah, you're looking great. Like there's a lot of psychological things that go into the peak week, and it boils down to, and the more peak weeks I do with people, the more I do, and kind of Jeff Albert's saying like it's a week not to fuck up. Yeah. That is more and more true to me. I think for some people, and I haven't worked with enough people to be like, I don't know, someone like Cliff who has seen it have a dramatic impact on a lot of people. I think for some it definitely can. Just spoke to Peter Fitchen about his contest prep, and like peaking for him makes a big difference. And I think for me, it may make quite a big difference, because I think just having seen myself dieted down to 180 pounds and then massed up even heavier, probably a bit fatter, but fuller, I look better. So I think for some people, if the more flat they are, it has an impact. But again, that's bodybuilders. So yeah.
No, cool. One last thing. If you are curious to learn more about peaking, you can actually head over to the membership side. We have a presentation on it. So Steve actually talked about Peak Week, and we have a presentation coming out, I think in 2 days or in September. I'm not entirely certain anymore, from Joey Klemczewski. Or Joe Klemczewski, who's only talking about his experiences with Peak Week. And yeah, this is a very interesting presentation. So if you want to learn more about that, head over to the membership side to learn more about that. So with that being said, let's move over to the next question. So Sean Dutton asked thoughts on Eric Hem's recent post against increasing set towards MRV. We kind of talked about it here the last week already. So Sean, just listen back to the episode that we released last week. And also, as Steve rightly pointed out, so we will get Mike and Eric on the podcast to talk about that. So I'll leave it up to a later point. All right. So other than that, Marvin Ferguson, while this sport can be a very individual process, I enjoy getting in sessions with friends. When someone is not following the same program, changing it up can feel like you are losing out on progress or tracking metrics. How would you adjust things to get in a weekly or bi-weekly session with partners when programs don't match up?
This is probably something we both struggle a little bit to answer.
Yeah, I was thinking
because
the
I
same
think
thing, like
we're both so robotic that I've struggled. People have tried to do this with me before. I know AJ has like come and visited me before, and like years ago, and we were training together. I always struggle with the idea of doing someone else's session. I think I did do one of his because I was in like a primer phase, and I was just like, fuck it, I'll just do one of his sessions. It's not a big deal. But if I'm in my own like training, if I'm training with someone, they do their training program. I want them to do their training program because I'm like, if you want the best results, you stick to your plan. So I want them to do theirs. I don't really want them working in with me. And the same with me. I want the best results, so I stick to my plan. And I don't find it like you can still get the benefit of they can watch you, they can spot you, you can still have the same things. I don't know why you have to do the same exercises in the same split necessarily. So I would say you can still be there and train together. You can just like you can watch his bench press while you do your hack squats, and he can watch you doing your hack squats while they rest. I don't think you have to be close together the entire time.
No, and I think at some point it's just you are at a point where you have a very good understanding of your training. So when it comes to RER, yada, 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 and perhaps the other guy doesn't. So if you then do a set of like, I don't know, 3 RER of hack squats. Just recently I got to know someone at my new gym, right? A younger fella came to me, started talking, stuff like that. And then he watched me do a set of tricep extensions. And he was just like, yeah, you have another rep in you, another rep in you. No, I don't, right? So this is also one thing, right? The other person doesn't really know what you're doing then if you are continuing doing your program. But I think it's all right. I mean, when Steve and I get together, it has always been like that. We're both doing just our stuff, but we're training together, right? But once again, I mean, we are absolutely biased here. We are probably not the types that enjoy doing this kind of, I don't know, combined session. I've never done it. I like to do my stuff, and yeah.
I had it with one client where he basically every week would train with his bros and just have this one bro out session. So everything else was on plan. And then this was essentially like you have a meal plan and then a free meal on the weekend. It was kind of like that. And just like a free meal can completely fuck up the whole week.
But I mean,
so can a one-off session
in
bro
the
out.
end, if it's still calculated and if what you're doing is kind of planned and not just like, okay, we're just winging it, we are destroying our chest here today, and you destroy it up until the point where it's truly destroyed, and you don't know whether you've done like 20 sets this time or 50 sets, then it can, of course, create some problems. But if it is kind of always the same, you go in there, you do always kind of the same stuff because it just matches up, then you can, of course, plan it into the entire program, kind of. It's the same when it comes to having clients who are still enjoying doing some cardio. I'm not the person telling them like, okay, you can't do any kind of cardio. If it's still important to them, then I'm saying like, okay, tell you what, we start things off with you continuing the cardio. I program the way I do, and then we will just reassess and reevaluate along the way and see whether you are recovering, how you're recovering, and if cardio then interferes with our programming, then we just need to have a talk in figuring out what's more important to you, right? And then perhaps make the appropriate adjustments. And this is the way you can do things as well. If the training session with your boys is very much important to you, plan it in, right? And then plan around it, kind of.
Yeah, I think that's the really important take home is if, just like, again, free meal example, say you overeat massively, then maybe you just taper things off the following days to make sure that it doesn't have the overall negative impact on the program. Same with, if you find after that you're really sore in a particular muscle group, and I just wouldn't be strict to your program. I don't think you ever should be 100% strict to a program. I think it's great to have a plan, but then modify as your body is telling you to, in terms of like, I don't know, if you're still beat up, maybe you just take an extra light day. Yes, it's not optimal, but so long as you're on point most of the time, again, the diet comparison, you're going to see results. Whilst me and Pascal are probably robotic and love our plan and not like everyone, we can both respect that other people kind of want that enjoyment element. And if that's the difference between you adhering long-term to not, then it's actually optimal for you. So yeah, go for it.
Absolutely. The next two questions are specifically towards Steve. So the first one, Joseph Kaufman asks, did Steve find his recent maintenance phase after his long cut to be effective? What, if any, changes would he make for the next time?
So I mean, I always find them effective because I come out of them feeling very, very motivated, very driven to get into some higher volumes again. After having done quite a lot of high volume training, it was kind of a blessing, kind of like, it's like the deload to the macro, like the block of hypertrophy. So I always find them really effective. And when I get into, like, when I'm going into them, I'm always a bit apprehensive and a bit like, do I want to do this? But then the weeks pass so quickly. So yeah, it definitely serves the job that I wanted it to. The only thing that I am playing around with a bit more is less longer primer sort of phases at particular stages and doing more kind of active recovery weeks after a deload week. So that's something I'm considering doing, especially if I'm going from kind of into a mass, because like if I'm going back into a cut, sure, I want to do a low volume maintenance, it makes sense. But if I'm going into a massing phase, then potentially an active recovery week after a deload. We talked about it on the podcast recently. I talked about it with Mike recently on the podcast. I haven't done it loads. So yeah, I'm still not sure which method I prefer. Like I think I don't think there's any downside to taking the longer primer phase, apart from psychologically it's difficult sometimes to take that long of a period at lower volumes. So I'm definitely interested to try using more active recovery weeks in future. So yeah, I don't know if Pascal, you've got much experience with like primer phases versus active recovery weeks.
I think it's always like situation dependent. I prefer if you have the time, do a primer phase, especially in between macro cycles. If you don't have the time, if it doesn't really align with your overall schedule, I think it can also be just fine to do or take like 2 weeks of active recovery. I feel, and just like this is just my gut feeling, I would say that the primer has still so much more benefits because you are still training hard. You're going in there, you're doing things in a lower repetition range. Probably, I would assume that the resensitization effect is bigger while still making progress. Many people think that only because it says maintenance phase that you're not making any kind of progress, which couldn't be further from the truth. You're still going in there, you're still training hard, you still train, 4 to 6 times per week, a lower volume, but still heavy compound lifts, right? While still reaping the rewards for after then the primer phase. So my gut feeling would say that probably a primer phase is still more beneficial than just like an active recovery block of around 2 weeks. Have I any kind of proof? No. This is really just my gut feeling, and it could be that I'm completely wrong, that it's even the other way around or so. But yeah, I see great value in primer phases. And I've seen it not just once. I've not only experienced with myself, but I've seen it a dozen of times by now with the people that I've done it with, that it was just like, okay, perhaps it's your first primer phase, or it's even the second one, right? And by the end of the primer phase, prepare for a crazy sensation when you go back into the gym and you go back to a hypertrophy style of training. It feels like you haven't trained in a very long time with that style of training, while in reality, you still did resistance training. It's a very weird feeling. It's a very weird feeling, as if you haven't lifted in a very long time, but you did. So yeah, and more compelling evidence is actually coming out showing that a resensitization effect is probably something that is taking place, which is very cool to see.
Yeah, I think one of the really cool things about the primer phase is because you're training with the heavier loads, more in the like 4 to 6 rep range on average, that you get that slight fiber type shifting, not changing, but more so becoming faster twitch again, which I think is propelling the next stage of training, because faster twitch muscle fibers are going to hypertrophy more, so generally is a good thing. And I think that may be why, because then you refresh all those higher rep ranges, so you go into them and they're just like, woof, they're real novel, they feel great. And I actually just said to you on a voice note that kind of people who haven't trained that much, or they've just done low volume training, maintenance stuff at home, coming into the gyms again, and they're feeling like, woof, such a solid, like they're getting solid sessions. I was like, this is pretty good anecdotal support for resensitization, like an adaptive resistance. I still struggle to believe that there's nothing to that because of just how every other biological system does it. Like even taste, you eat the same food over and over again, it no longer tastes so good. Or same with like spicy food, you eat spicy food all the time, it no longer becomes as spicy, you have to get spicier and spicier. So every like tanning, everything kind of works the same way where the body resists it. So I just struggle to see that this isn't happening.
Yeah. So very similar question then. Darko Stankovic, when Steve looks back at his recent mass phase, would he change anything during that period, and what are his plans for the next massing period? Also, does he feel grateful for his fortitude during that period due to his physical health problems?
I guess that's, the last mass where I pushed to 200 plus. I still am not sure. So actually it's funny because we talked about, I had a consultation with Jared at the time where I was at 200 pounds, feeling awful, feeling sick all the time. And Jared convinced me to mass rather than mini cut. Yeah. And he is still assured that that was a beneficial time and it was a good thing to have done and the right decision, and it paid off. I have nothing to dispute him against that, apart from I felt awful during that period of time. And to put a client through that, if someone isn't super serious, I wouldn't want to put many people through that sort of thing. It was just incredibly uncomfortable. So if I can not get there and still build tons of muscle, I want to do that. So yeah, reflecting on it, the only thing I would change is, and something I've been very conscious of doing, because Gabrielle, when I had a consultation with her, because I was essentially, to rewind, so if people aren't aware, I was having some kind of gut issues, and that was down to basically feeling very nauseous all the time, struggling to get in my calories, which led me towards more highly palatable food. I was drinking I don't know, a whole bottle of chocolate milk a day. I was having 2 Mascana shakes a day, and that's 2,000 calories already from that. I was having fruit juices. I still was getting over 30 grams of fiber, which isn't very high considering my carbs were at 700 grams, but my quality of nutrition dropped. So I'm being very cautious this time around to keep up my fruit and veg intake big time, and keep whole grains in there, even if it's somewhat difficult. And also what's helped me this time around is front loading my calories. I found that to really help my appetite, having more calories early in the day, so I'm not backloading so many, and that's only going to have helped my sleep as well. So yeah, it's exciting to know, and this is why I like bodybuilding. One of the reasons it's always a sense of perfection to try and get there. You're never perfect. You always learn lessons about previous phases. So yeah, those would be some of my take homes. But overall, I'm very happy that I stuck through. Now I've seen cutting down. It's just well, we were baking something under there. Didn't really know what was going on, but once I took it out of the oven, it showed itself.
No, very cool. I mean, I told you already, I find it very cool to follow your entire journey, and I feel privileged of being so close to that journey and taking part in that journey ever since 3.5 years already, and more years to come. Just seeing you develop and go through this kind of crazy transformation in such a short period of time already is very, very cool to see. And I'm very excited to see where that journey will take you, because you have now kind of figured out what works for you. And I think from here on onwards, it can go a long way up to the point where it's then perhaps once again requiring a little bit more attention of figuring things out than when things are even more so slowing down.
Yeah. And likewise, it's really nice to actually have these back and forths. I think we discover stuff we're always thinking about, and being kind of thinking about our week and what's gone on, but it's nice to just sit down with you and think through everything. And yeah, also seeing your development equally has been
just
really
imagine
cool.
In 10 years, if we're still doing the Improvement Season podcast, you can watch 10 years of our athletic and also business and personal development. That would be crazy, and very, very cool also for us to have that as a diary.
Yeah.
Okay, just take a look back how fucked up we've been and how small we've been, and now here we are. It's very cool.
I always say it, when I see memories pop up where I've shared the Improvement Season on Facebook and old episodes, and I'm like, whoa, Pascal, your English has just gone from I understood you to poof.
Hey, funny enough, basically right before the episode or the podcast recording I had before this Improvement Season, I actually was in our NAS. So we have kind of a NAS where things are being stored, especially for us, for pictures of memories. And I even just watched a video where we've both been in a contest prep in 2017. I've been in London, was wearing that 3DMJ stringer from you, and fuck, I was tiny. Fuck, I was small. It's crazy. I'm just taking a look at myself, even just the legs, just tiny sticks, and how far we've both come already in 3.5 years. It's very, very cool to see, and I'm very excited to see where this will be in comparison to 2017 in 2027, for example. And I think that for many of the listeners, it's probably the same thing. We take you on a journey here on the Improvement Season podcast, right? I mean, you can go back now 3.5 years, rewatch the entire thing in just a matter of a couple of weeks now, and you have basically our entire 3.5 years of the development behind you. And yeah, that is very cool. Very cool.
Even thinking to your backdrop, how many times your backdrop's changed.
Yeah. And yours didn't.
Maybe. I think I've changed. I've only moved once. Yeah. So yours has changed like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cool. So we are up in time. So guys, thank you very much as always for listening. And one more time, as a quick reminder, you may have seen the small promo video in the midst of this improvement season podcast. We still have the mini-cut movement, right? You can always sign up. So it is always ready for you. If you are ready to jump into a mini-cut and you need somewhat of a guidance, this is the perfect place for you. Go ahead, sign up for £99 for then 7 weeks, or like I think 70 days in total, that you have then access to everything. You have also access to us, and then you will be guided through a mini-cut in the most efficient way possible. So if you're ready, hit the link below here in the description below, and then do a mini-cut, because now is the perfect timing in doing so. It's summertime, and also the gyms have reopened in the UK, so what are you waiting for?
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much. We'll catch you soon.
Cheers.
So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Flor. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge, and I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.